of the City of Tallahassee Ethics Board for, what is it, February 23rd. We are meeting at an unusual time from 11 to 2 in the City Commission chamber due to a conflict with our normal time. We will be back next month on our normal schedule until September. And I'll note the presence of a quorum. Everybody, if you will look, there are two things I'm going to ask you to do before we get started, or as we get started. First, you have a piece of paper in front of you that says September Board Meeting Information. That's the other month where there's a conflict with this room from our normal meeting time, and we need to pick a date for our September meeting, and the sooner we could lock it down, the less likely we are to have a conflict. So you will see five days and times on there. There are 3 of them that are labeled A, B, and C. If you would take a look, see if you have any conflicts, circle any that you are okay with, and give those to Julie, and she will come back and tell us what we have selected. We'll just do it on paper without having to have a lot of discussion. If anybody can't make any of those 3 times, let me know sometime later in the meeting, and we'll come back and try to provide some other options. So, Ms. Meadows-Keefe, there is mine. Awesome. The second thing, later on the agenda, is the selection of our 6th member that this board will select to replace Mr. Friedman. You have in front of you another piece of paper with a list of all the applicants. I think Julie sent out an email asking everyone to come to this meeting prepared with their top choices. What I'd like to do is, if you will circle on that piece of paper your top choices, however many there are, then what we'll do before we get to that item on the agenda is prepare a list, and I can simply read off to you among the 6 of us, you know, this person got selected by 3 people, this person got selected by 6 people, this person got selected by 1 person. That will help to narrow it without, you know, before we get into the discussion. I just like to have a list of names so that we can narrow the 17 down, hopefully, to a shorter list. So if you would do that and give it to Lucy, or put it out someplace where Lucy can pick them up, then she'll compile the list for us, and by the time we get there, we'll have a nice short list, if that works for everyone. And I'm seeing no one's nodding or shaking their head vehemently no, so that's what we're going to do. The first item on our agenda is a recognition, which Ms. Meadows-Keefe is
responsible for. So I'm going to ask for folks to leave their seats for a moment. I know that's disruptive, but we do have a presentation for our departing board member. And hopefully on your way down, you can drop your list of board member preferences to Lucy. And while we're doing the recognition for Mr. Friedman, she'll tabulate those.
I was going to say I take donations too, but
when she was saying you could drop off, I was thinking I was supposed to bring cash.
All right, if y'all could cluster together like you semi-like each other, that would be great. We're now in a posture where we are saying a fond farewell and thank you to one of the original 6 board members. So it's an interesting time. It's a time when we remember kind of our early history and what each board member's contributed along the way. And Mr. Friedman was selected for his unique voice, a voice that was needed at the time and that we will miss as we continue along. But we understand that Mr. Friedman enjoys traveling with his wife for months at a time. So that's something I envy, and still being working and things like that. So we are here to recognize him and to present him a small token of our appreciation for his service with us. And if you'd like to say a word or two, that would be great. All right.
Well, I want to thank you. I've always liked white wrapping paper. Good stuff. I suppose I should take a look and say thank you. It's really, it's been a very pleasure working with folks such as you. And the reason is because, frankly, in your life, you meet certain pools of people that you really grow to respect, and frankly, you meet groups you don't. And I've been very, very fortunate. I worked in the FBI, which is probably the finest bunch of people I've ever met. I was in the Army, good people. This group is right up there with the Bureau people. Thank you very, very much. It's an honor to be here. Liz, thank you. If you can see it, you guys see. Just one quick remark, and I'll get it out of the way. The remark basically is this. I'm a believer in things being open. I'm a believer in us going aggressively when we see that something is wrong. I know sometimes it's tough to stay within the bounds that are set for us, and I hope that as the board is trying to do, that the bounds will be expanded, because I don't think you can ever have enough integrity. That's it.
She's working right now.
Okay.
And as I've said before, were it not for trying to maintain Mr. Friedman's marital relationship, we would not have accepted his resignation. So, but we recognize family comes first. Yes, that's a good rule to live by. Mr. Butzine, you are recognized, sir.
Well, I'm here on behalf of Common Cause and also representative of Integrity Florida. I'd like to speak in the non-agenda slot as well, but I just want to say that we appreciate Tom Friedman's leadership on this very important committee. He has been a voice of independence, and we appreciate that and hope that it will be a model to the future work of this board. So, Mr. Friedman, thank you, and Godspeed in traveling with your wife. I've enjoyed that in my own retirement, traveling the world and visiting grandchildren. Nothing can be more important, but your service is appreciated.
Thank you, and I would say to you that I much appreciate the fact that you folks have stayed with us throughout, and I say, I'm addressing all of you, our normal audience, guys that are stuck in to try to help us do what we do. Sometimes you're happy to hear things, sometimes you're not so happy to hear them, but you need to hear them. That's the important thing. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, the next item on our agenda is approval of the minutes from our January 17th meeting. Does anyone have any corrections, additions, comments concerning the minutes, or would someone like to move the approval of the minutes?
I'll move they be approved.
Where's the card?
I'm sorry.
Does Jared
But
have it in the box?
Oh, let me finish the minutes and I'll come to you if I may. Okay, I have a motion from Mr. Friedman, a second from Ms. Phillips on the minutes. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, like sign. The minutes are approved. You're recognized. I'm sorry. Didn't have it in front of me.
Jerry's.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. I'm Ben Wilcox, representing Citizens for Ethics Reform. And I would, on behalf of Citizens for Ethics Reform, I would also like to thank Mr. Friedman for his service on the board. We really appreciate the time you've put into this and all your hard work. I just wanted to touch base back to a point I made at an earlier meeting as a procedural point. I have the ethics officer's report here, and again, I don't know, there's maybe 5 items on here, but the outcome of each one is closed. And I would like to see that be a recommendation to the board and have the board take final action to either, approve or not approve, the recommended order. I think when somebody files a complaint, with the ethics board, it deserves, a vote by the board to close before it's closed. And I don't think the optics are good for Julie to just be, closing complaints. I think there needs to be a review by the board. That's my testimony.
Okay, appreciate that. Thank you. We did have a brief discussion, I think, at the last meeting, and I know I've talked to Julie and Jerry some about this. I agree with you personally that it would be good it is good for the board to take the final action. We do need to be careful on these complaints that if we get into a series of questions of Julie concerning the complaint, that we may be moving into territory that needs to be covered in a shade meeting rather than in a public meeting. It certainly would be disclosed afterwards, but we're going to have to walk kind of a fine line on that one. So we've been talking about how to figure that one out, but I will try to address it when we get to that item, which is coming up about now. So the next item is the ethics officer report. The first piece is the one page of Ms. Meadows-Keefe's activities, and I would ask her if there's anything on there she needs to highlight for us.
The only thing I'd highlight is that, as I indicated at the beginning of the year, I'm emphasizing for the first quarter at least a lot of educational sessions for employees, for advisory boards, and other entities within the community. So that's what I've been doing. I've got several more to complete in the next month or so. And, I'm making some changes each time I deliver it to more specifically tailor education to the folks in the room. So that has been the highlight of this month.
And I understand, just for the other board members, from some conversations with Julie, that there was a little bit of a backlog on some of the training, or the education, Ms. Phillips, some of the education, and that's getting caught up, so that this will be on a more kind of a smoothed schedule over the coming months or years, and we won't maybe have quite so many sessions for Ms. Meadows-Keefe to conduct. And I also would note that you've been sent the links to some of the city training materials and training options. I hope you've had a chance to look at them, because they are very good, and the city, I think, is working very hard at trying to provide some materials through internet links that people can get to on their own time, or I don't know, I assume they allow them to do that at work when their interest is piqued rather than when they're scheduled to be in a room sitting and listening.
The plan, I'll just let everyone know in this forum that the plan going forward to address the issue with the bit of a backlog we had was that at new employee orientation, they're introduced to a lot of stuff, including their benefits. I find people want to know about their benefits. So it's at that time that some ethics introductory materials will be presented. They'll get to meet me, know where my office is. I will sketch some things, then refer them to the internet link that I'd sent to you. So going forward, we're going to handle it on a consistent basis because the benefits presentation is consistent. So it's going to be part of the whole array of things that folks get, being conscious that we're not going to overwhelm them with a whole lot, but we are going to introduce them, talk to them about what they need to know immediately, and then refer to some internet training, education.
The next item in this package is the hotline tracking report. There are items 94 to 98. And what I'd like to do is open this up to, if any member of the board has any questions or comments on these, and I would ask Ms. Meadows-Keefe to keep any of her comments pretty much constrained to the information that's on the sheet. But if any member of the board sees any of these that they think deserves more information, then we will keep that open for a bit. Mr. Friedman.
I'd like to address something in a general sense, and this concerns me. I've been thinking about it, and that is the fact that the ethics officer makes these calls. It would seem to me that it would be nice if there was some sort of approval by the board, because, and I'm thinking in terms of potentially the ethics officer being sued. If the board is going to accept the stuff, the board should vote to basically say, we agree. I really believe that that would be in the board's best interest, too.
I think that we are moving toward a policy that would do that, where this, instead of saying closed, it would say recommended closed. But again, the concern is that if you saw one of these that you had a question about, that we not get into a discussion of someone who might have been alleged to have committed an ethics violation in a public meeting.
If I may, there's two possibilities here. One is obviously that you can table that approval that month until you can take whatever appropriate action. The other one is you could take a vote where you would preserve the rights of the complainant.
Right.
In essence, give them a limited immunity. It's not the right word for it exactly, but that's the same kind of concept where they could make their thing in.
Right.
If they needed to pursue something further, they could if they came up with more information, because you don't want to finalize it forever either.
Right. Or we could take one where we close this, but the board on its own initiative opens its own complaint, if you will. So I think there are a couple of paths. But until we get a written policy in front of everybody, what I'd like to do is just take the opportunity for us to unclose anything this month at least.
Toward that end, I don't see anything that needs to be changed.
Yeah, most of these look like they were. I understand why someone would call the ethics board, but I'm not sure they were ethics complaints, or certainly not City of Tallahassee ethics complaints. The theft seems to be referred to the City of Tallahassee Police Department seems appropriate. So, Mr. Currington.
I would just point out that Article 9 of the bylaws do address this in paragraph A4, and we may want to look at the wording of that. But it does call now for dismissal by the board. It doesn't talk about a vote, though, and it doesn't talk about who shall initially investigate, so we may want to clarify that.
Right. I think we can expand it to address both public concerns and board member concerns without us moving into a discussion that in a meeting that needs to not be in a public meeting, or at least not initially in a public meeting, and that's just the one concern that I've had that will have to be, whoever's the chair will have to be cautious in accepting questions, or Ms. Meadows-Keefe will have to be cautious in what she doles out in answers, because I know on many of these, she knows a lot more information than is on this sheet, and some of it is information that doesn't need to be made public unless there's a genuine ethics concern. The next item is the budget. And I would simply ask Ms. Meadows-Keefe if there's anything unusual on this page, or if there's, it looked to me like we're just kind of on a month-to-month, we're about where we expected to be. It looks like we're going to have a big surplus on the campaign refunds.
Yeah, not only that, but I think we've actually spent less on the legal bills as well. And we had some unencumbered funds that were left that we've been able to use. So we've been running, I think, pretty efficiently this fiscal year.
Right. And then the campaign contribution refund, this is the refunds just for January. We had 3 additional refunds.
Yes, sir.
And that brings the total up to, total amount refunded?
You see it?
$40?
Just,
$40 for the month. Total, I'm not sure that's on this.
okay.
It is.
It is?
Yeah, hold on.
Unclassified charges. $40, we've paid out, it looks like 138, but
Year to date.
Okay, well, and,
138.
138.
okay, can we make sure there's a cumulative, that it's clear what the cumulative total is? And then I think before the next election cycle, we're going to have a discussion. I'd ask Ms. Meadows-Keefe to put on her long-term agenda, make sure that we have some discussion about what we can do to publicize that program and our role in that program. Since we have we don't actually cut the checks, we have a very specific sliver of the process that's assigned to us. Any other questions of Ms. Meadows-Keefe concerning those 4 items in her monthly report? Okay. We would next go to the ethics moment, and I think Ms. Meadows-Keefe has 2 items for us to look at.
I do, and actually I pulled something hot off the press this morning. I would highlight to the board and to the public that the board is scheduled to receive its annual ethics education for the year at the next meeting of the board. Since we have had ongoing ethics moments at the behest of the chair for the last year, this education time may not be for the entire meeting. It may be about 50 minutes long, give or take, and it's going to address the board responsibilities. So sometimes we talk about external matters that are of interest to the board. The education they receive in March will be more tailored to the individual board members and the requirements that they have. But for this month, I would call the board's attention to, and I did not print it out because I just got it this morning, but it's House Bill 7021, and that is actually, I think we have referenced something like this before, but this is heightening the ethics requirements and disclosure for municipal officers. So if your municipality has more than $5 million in total revenue, you're going to have to file a full financial disclosure statement. So that's the full-on Form 6, rather than the less detailed Form 1 that you are more familiar with, most likely. And then it goes on to, and they have not caught Ms. Phillips' bug for training versus education. She may want to contact whoever the drafter is of this legislation, but they are, instead of recommending what goes into an education process or presentation, it says must. And it goes through various topics that you are all familiar with because we have covered them. And then there's also some encouragement for some form of accreditation for the ethics presenter. It's a little unclear about who would be accrediting the educator or trainer. So, and then also when local officials are filing their disclosure documents and they certify that they have received the required education, they'd have to provide the name of the training provider. So it just seems to me like they're beefing up some of these requirements, and they're applying requirements for constitutional officers to municipal elected officials and also to some like water management district members, et cetera. So those are being expanded.
Ms. Meadows-Keefe, could I ask you to make sure that House Bill 7021 is posted on our website along with the other materials, since it's not on there now, but just so people don't have to go off to the My Florida House site to find an additional piece of material from our meeting?
I will make sure it's also included in the minutes as an attachment. The next one is Senate Bill 306. And this again is making some changes to 112. You know, we've talked in the past about voting conflicts and how people have to abstain from voting, and the language is always special, private, gain, or loss. According to this measure, that language would be stricken. So it wouldn't have to be a special private gain or loss, it would be any. Okay, so we wouldn't have this struggle now with, now they've got kind of a formula that you follow to determine if it's special or not. Now it's any. And then they do put later on in the bill that a county, municipal, or local officer would not be prohibited from voting on a measure if the matter would result in an economic benefit or harm to the public generally, or to a broad segment of the public. So they do voice an awareness of the special nature of local government, and they don't want to hijack the elected officials' ability to vote on things like a budget, for example. So that is also drafted and filed at this point. The final thing that's been included in your materials is just for your interest, the Florida Commission on Ethics prepares an annual report. That's been included. I just note for you quickly a few items. On page 9 of that report, you look at the number of complaints that they got in calendar year 2016. The most complaints, if I'm reading this correctly, 5.9% were municipal employees. Municipal electeds got 17.3% of Ethics Commission complaints. Now, granted, that's only 38, but percentage-wise, they did beat out anyone else. So there is certainly interest in the ethical conduct of local government employees.
Well, and in fairness, just in raw numbers, they outnumber most of the other groups. So
That's true.
You would expect some proportionality. And it's not to pick on municipal electeds.
That's a good point, and I hadn't thought of that. But thank you for that, Mr. Chair. And on page 12, we have action taken on complaints. So they receive a certain number and they act on 188. And you see that often they're dismissed for lack of legal sufficiency and dismissed also at the probable cause level. And the subjects of complaints, as the chair has pointed out in the past, the vast majority of complaints received in 2016 were related to misuse of your public position. And I meant to say this before, but some of the comments that we've heard already from the public today related to my complaint form. Later on in the meeting, we're going to talk about our recommendations to ourselves as a board and recommendations for the commission and city that cover some of this. But we're trying to attack the misuse of position in the city ethics code, recognizing its prevalence.
That's on page 10.
That's on page 10 of the Ethics Commission's annual report. The Ethics Commission also has made several legislative recommendations that you can read for yourselves. They do highlight the enhanced financial disclosure for local elected officials. And then the last recommendation that's contained on page 25, the very bottom, they're recognizing that many government services are now provided by private entities. So they're contracting out governmental functions, and they're wanting to apply provisions of the ethics code to those private entities that are providing those traditionally public functions. So that's your ethics moment for February.
Thank you. Any questions of Ms. Meadows-Keefe? Okay. The next item on the agenda is public comment on agenda items. And I think we had just people want to talk about non-agenda items. That would move us to the reviewing our replacement, well, not our replacement, but reviewing the next person who will be our sixth member. We're not going to try to replace Mr. Friedman because that would be a foolish exercise.
Would it?
Well, apparently your wife feels that way, so I'm going with her wise judgment.
So did I.
Let's see if we have a list.
Julie, do you want these, or you want us to get on to Lucy?
The calendar's not here, I'll take that.
Well, does everyone have a list of the names in front of them? Because I can go through and just kind of tell you where we are in terms of who was noted on your sheets. Mr., I'm going to butcher this name, Arlano had 1. Mr. Chambers had 2. Mr. Clark had 1. Mr. DeAngelis had 2. Ms. Fletcher had 2. Mr. Grant had 2. Ms. Jacobs had 1. Mr. Mitchell had 4. Mr. Newman had 1. Mr. Rabinus had 3. Mr. Wilson had 2. So if it's okay, what I'd like to do is sort of start with those and see if we can move toward narrowing to 1. If anybody wants to lob out another name that isn't on that list, then we certainly will come back to that. I don't want to cut off any discussion. And in full disclosure, I would would note that, well, 2 things. One, reviewing the applications. I'm going to be happy with anybody on this list. I think we have a wonderful group of people to choose from. Also, I would note that half of these are people who I know personally or professionally, and if we get into discussions of individual people, I will disclose that. And I would hope as we move toward any final decision that each board member, if we get down to somebody that is someone that you have worked with or someone you know professionally, just please disclose that to everyone so we will know. I mean, it's in my view, it's a good thing because you know that person's personality as well as what they look like on paper, but it also potentially changes your position on them a little bit. Does anybody have any comments at this point? Mr. Smith, you made eye contact there for a minute.
Not at this point. When we get into the discussion, I was happy to see that two of the highest numbers were two of the ones that I selected. So, so.
You're going to fit right in. I would say, while several of these people I know and respect very highly, I tend to think that, and no offense to anyone on the board, but another old white guy is maybe not what we need in terms of diversity on the board. Certainly, a female would put us at a 3-to-3 mix, which probably is demographically a little closer to what Tallahassee looks like. We have had, I believe there's one Hispanic, one African American, one other, and one Native American in the group of 17. Mr. Friedman.
I would like to see someone who doesn't fit into the mold of being admitted to the bar of the state of Florida, who has got some different experiences than the majority of the rest of us.
Okay.
And I think it's, when you look at the names that way, I think you have to look in a slightly different fashion.
Right. I think on the names that I read off, I think the bottom four, Mr. Mitchell, Mr. Newman, Mr. Rabinus, Mr. Wilson, all of whom are people I worked with in the legislature, I think all four of them are members of the long-standing members of the Florida Bar. I don't believe that anyone else whose name I read, I'm not sure about Mr. Clark. I don't think he's a member. I have to look at his application, but the others are not. I would say I know Miss Fletcher from a class at FSU, and she is younger, female, multi-ethnic, and very, very bright. So in terms of diversity, she's one of the names that I probably would lobby for. Ms. Phillips.
You know, when it's pretty obvious on some of these if it's a male or female, but I did not look at their race at all. I didn't consider that. I mean, I didn't even note it. So I was looking for someone with the appropriate experience more than anything else. And the other thing that I noticed throughout the applications, which was a bit frustrating to me, is that some of the applicants didn't complete the information requested. I'm not going to say that their application was incomplete, but I do believe pretty strongly that this board, when we review information, we have to be pretty specific and I guess picky about what we're doing. And if a person doesn't provide all the information requested on an application, then I'm not sure they're going to be as detailed as we need them to be. So I think that's one of the things that I noticed immediately. Of course, I am an editor, so that's, but still, I believe very strongly if the information is not provided, and one of the questions was describe your experience. I think that's how it was in ethics, and some of the people didn't even describe that. So I found that a bit frustrating, and just wanted to make note of that.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Friedman.
I want to piggyback. In my professional experience, when someone doesn't provide an answer, generally indicates as you say, possibly carelessness, that's being generous. The other implication is that they don't want to answer it. And I don't think we need anybody on the ethics board who's not willing to kind of hang their laundry out in public.
Okay. Other comments?
How are we going to move through this? I mean,
Well, I'm uncertain. I'm kind of hoping somebody will say, you know, my top choice is, and
okay. Well, I'll take that lead. I have two that I was interested in, and that was Emmett Mitchell. I know he's an attorney, but he certainly has the experience. But I had several questions to our legal counsel about him, or at least his experience. And then the other individual that I personally know is Jay Newman, or James Newman. I actually serve on a board with him currently, and he has a lot of experience in state government. He has been involved extensively, as I have, in ethics application, just in his experience. So if we're lobbying for individuals, that's the person
Okay,
that I would lobby for.
Mr. Davis, you were next.
I was just going to make a comment that when I look at the makeup of our board and knowing that Tom is leaving, we've got younger folks. I'm not too young anymore, but we've got a pretty good balance. So I'm personally not. For example, when I looked at the application of Bruce Grant, he's not a lawyer, long-time position in state government, West Point,
Yeah.
master's degree, PhD. He would bring a unique life experience to this board. He's not someone who would be lacking in the ability to deal with the issues that he may not have been personally involved in his work over the years, specifically in ethics policies, but surely he would bring a wealth of experience. So I wouldn't think that if we added someone like that we would have an undue number of older white men. But again, I thought that he had such a diverse experience, different from most of us here, that I appreciated that.
Yeah.
And let me just piggyback on that before I recognize you, Mr. Friedman. To me, Mr. Grant probably is the closest to replacing Mr. Friedman in terms of knowledge, skills, and expertise. And I would, again, disclose, I know Mr. Grant from a class at FSU, and he is tremendously bright. This is a guy who, at not a young age, went back to get his PhD, so he is very plugged in. He's not moving quietly into retirement. He is on it. Mr. Friedman.
He was my top pick, and it was just what you said. I thought that you would want to get someone who had some appreciation for the dark side of life, which is what, unfortunately, I have, and I have no doubt he does. That would be who, if you were going to lobby here, I would lobby for it. I've never met the man, but I like his resume, and it seems to me to be a balancing thing to all you lawyers. Or me lawyer too, but I mean,
Right. Ms. McNeil, you're on the spot.
So I'm with Sonny. I went with Emmett Mitchell just because of his experience. I liked the ethics background that he has. I was kind of wanting to not choose another attorney, but I was just really impressed with his resume. And seeing as he had 4 votes, I mean, I think he's well thought of on the board.
Right. And Mr. Smith?
Mr. Mitchell and is it Wayne?
Rubinus.
Those were my two. I really like the state ethics background that Mitchell had. So I was leaning towards Mr. Mitchell.
Okay. It sounds like we may be down to Mr. Mitchell and Mr. Grant. if that meets with people's, just to continue to narrow this. Again, I agree with Sonny. I know Mr. Newman, and he would be an outstanding addition, as would pretty much anybody on this list.
Good bunch. Yeah. I'm just agreeing
Can
with
we
you, I'm sorry.
add Mr. Newman as a third, or no?
Well, we can. If we're going to add, then I'd like to put Ms. Fletcher back on the list, too. So if we did Grant and Mitchell in kind of a first slot, and then Newman and Fletcher in a second slot, that would get us down to 4.
That's good.
What about Rabinus, since 3 people, I think, and they did
Well,
have the second highest
that-
tally.
That's true. Wayne and Bucky
They're very similar.
are very, very similar background. They both were long-term legislative employees over the Ethics and Elections Committees in their respective houses. I can tell you they're both, I know them both personally well. They're both very stand-up guys and super knowledgeable on all this stuff. They would come in knowing certainly the state processes tremendously well. So you want to put Mr. Rabinus in kind of in that second slot?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so that'll give us, we're down to 5. Grant, Mitchell, Newman, Fletcher, Rabinus.
I picked 3 of the 5. Choices.
I have to disclose that I know Mr. Rabinus.
Years in the Capitol would do that to you.
Yep.
I mean, I think if we're looking to replace Friedman's background, Grant, I think, is our choice, but if we're looking to do more of an ethics background, got a few on here.
I
have
think
a-
that's a good summation, yes.
I have a question about Mr. Mitchell. I actually have several questions. Is it appropriate to
Please.
do that? Okay. So I was trying to determine where his home address is, because he did not put that on his application. So I know he went through the process and was verified, but is he it's required that he be a city resident, but he only put his work address down.
His resume has Rebecca Drive.
Is that, did we verify that address?
We did. One of the verification processes that we go through is that we check with the supervisor of elections, and they verify the home address and that they do vote in the city.
Okay, perfect. The second question I have is, I know that he stated that part of his practice is to represent clients or individuals, or clients, I guess, before the Ethics Commission and the Florida Commission on Ethics and the Florida Ethics Commission, so my question is, for his past clients and current clients, does he have a conflict of interest if there's ever an issue before this board with either of those two? And would he have to limit his practice for future?
Well, he certainly would have to be careful of conflict moving forward in terms of anything in the past. If it had been a client several years ago, I think there would only be a conflict if there was some factual overlap. And Mr. Currington might tell us a little bit more if he has any other comments about conflicts versus a practicing attorney in the ethics area.
I would simply say that based on his resume, I don't see a standard conflict of interest that would bar him from sitting. Now, could future cases involve situations where it's a prior client of his or whatever? that could certainly arise, as it could for any member of this board, really. You know, it could be one of our friends that gets a complaint filed against them or whatever. But no disbarring conflict of interest to me.
Mr. Davis, that's too big a smile. So I'm going to put you back on the spot.
Well, I would just say Mr. Mitchell was one of my top choices, too. I thought he had a very unusual background, too, that would make him a fine member of this board.
You get too many riches. Too many of these folks are really good.
It's a hard decision
delightful.
because
I mean, whoever you pick is going to be fine. I don't think it's something to gyrate around too much. I just put them up for vote and let's get over with.
right.
How many of us voted for Mitchell? 4?
Mr. Mitchell had 4, Mr. Robinus had 3, Mr. Wilson, Mr. Grant, Ms. Fletcher, Mr. DeAngelis, and Mr. Chambers each had 2. So we managed to vote for over half of the list,
Okay. So,
which again is a good thing. It's like which Christmas present do you open first in the morning when you're a kid?
right. So can we narrow it further, or do you want to discuss anybody? I mean, several of us have discussed our preferences, so.
Yeah. Mr. Freeman just passed me a note, just for full disclosure, that says in pink, public which I wonder about.
In fuller disclosure, our council passed it to me. So.
It says public comment. So I would ask if any of you would like to comment on any of the R17. We certainly, obviously, would. You can't slow down our decision-making process, let me say. No? Mr. Butzine?
Full disclosure, we have lunches before these meetings. We met a couple of days ago. We looked over the candidates, and we were impressed with the full slate. And we decided against making any recommendations, specific recommendations. Maybe that's in part because we feel that if we made any recommendations, they might automatically be voted against by this board. But it's truly a slate of very well-qualified candidates, and I think the committee would be well-served by having any of them.
Okay, I appreciate that. Thank you. And you made Mr. Friedman's day, I believe. I would take a motion if anybody would like to make a motion.
I move Mr. Emmett Mitchell.
Bucky?
Bucky.
I can't call him Emmett any more than I can call Raymond Wilson Raymond. Is there a second?
Second.
Second from Mr. Smith. I'm going to step a little bit out of order here. Are there any comments or discussion before we take a vote? No, I'm seeing and hearing no's. Okay, so we would be voting on Mr. Mitchell as the 6th member of the board to replace Mr. Freeman. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Pose, like sign.
No,
Okay,
I'm opposed.
okay. That'll put us on I think 4 to 2. Me.
Does it have to be unanimous?
Well, I don't know, Miss.
I thought it did.
Do we have something in the bylaws on the vote? Ms. Meadows Keefe is going to check for us.
Is Mr. Currington have bylaws with him?
Yes,
I do,
he's
I do,
looking.
I'm looking at them.
Great.
He's looking too. I don't know why I thought
I think
did.
Mr. Friedman and I are,
I want to see, I'm going to
Toward
move
Mr. Grant?
Mr. Grant after this, yeah. Because I think it gives the board a
That's
greater
kind of our-
breadth of
that's
diversity
kind of our top two that we,
intellectually, yeah.
yeah.
But frankly, beyond that, I would,
I'm good with that.
you know, I mean, those are the two that I consider.
As is often the case, we sometimes find flaws and we have to actually apply something. I'm looking at the bylaws, Article 3, paragraph C, entitled Vacancy and Removals, sub 3A and 3B, and I bring them both up because it raises an omission maybe. If we were talking about an incumbent, paragraph A says, if the member is eligible to serve another term and wishes to be reappointed, that member may be reappointed by a majority vote of the remaining members of the board. Alternatively, B, if the majority of the board vote not to reappoint, the ethics officer would then take applications to fill the vacancy. The ethics officer would take applications and ask the sitting member if they are interested in being reappointed. If that member wishes to be reappointed, he or she would be considered without a formal application when the board reviews the applicant pool and makes a decision. Both of these apply to incumbents, but B doesn't refer to a majority vote, which arguably is an omission. But so far, it seems to be silent on if we're dealing with someone off the street as opposed to an incumbent. So let me continue to look, but
Okay.
Because I just bring that up because I remember the city commission appointment has to be unanimous.
The board did vote when the board was just 4 members. And I'm trying to recall, because we did go through those applications and make 2 appointments in the form of Ms. McNeil and Mr. Friedman. So it was unanimous?
That's my recollection. Yes.
I would prefer it be unanimous.
As would I.
I see a bylaw change in the future.
yeah. And I don't know, I'm not good at giving spur-of-the-moment opinions, but if it is silent, I know we've talked in the past about whether Robert's Rules of Order apply. And I think Robert's Rules of Orders would provide for a majority vote if there's silence, but that's not an opinion yet. It's a passing thought.
Right.
I don't know.
Right.
Well, in light of I prefer that it's unanimous. So in light of the 2 negative votes, I would like to withdraw my motion, but the second has to be withdrawn first, right? Is that correct?
Well, we'd have to reconsider the vote by which
Reconsider the
it
vote.
passed.
And the prevailing side would be me.
So you're moving to reconsider.
I'm moving to reconsider.
All in favor of reconsideration, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. I'm going to call that a majority.
Okay?
So we are now back on your motion, and I don't know that you have to withdraw a second. You want to withdraw your motion
Yes.
and put us back in discussion, so we would be back in discussion.
I love parliamentary procedure. Okay, so we're back in discussion.
And Mr. Friedman is,
Before we vote, I'd like to consider getting a sense of the members of the board as to what it is we're looking for. Are we looking, because obviously we have 2 strong candidates, and I would hope that whoever's appointed will be one of the 2. Are we looking for someone with an impeccable ethics background, or are we looking for someone who comes from yet a different part of life that has a very strong background and can give diversity of opinion? I mean, I noticed we started off talking about diversity of ethnic. Well, that's fine, but diversity of opinion is every bit as important. And so my question is, what would other folks on the board like to see? Do you want someone strong in ethics, or do you want someone who would give it, a little bit different opinion of things?
Mr. Davis?
Part of my thought process as one member would be, who could we select who could do the job well, but would also be highly appreciated by the public whom we serve. And when I see someone like Bruce Grant, I think that the public would, if they heard of his background and qualifications, and I'm sure that would apply for most of these applicants, they would say, we appreciate that caliber of person, a citizen of this community, is serving on that board. So to me, I'm thinking of the public a little bit, because not just a little bit, but in a significant way, because that's obviously who we serve, and they need to have our confidence. I think that lends confidence to us when they feel very comfortable about who's on this board, at least is more comfortable than not. That's just some thoughts.
And I would, my personal view, I think Mr. Mitchell would be outstanding, but I am tending to tilt away from another lawyer, since when you leave, 3 of the 5 of us will be lawyers, and in terms of diversity of background and experience, it seemed to me that's kind of why I tilted the way that I tilted, was toward people who weren't lawyers. No offense to lawyers.
You know, saying that, I mean, it took me 30 years or so to get past my education.
Well, I think we're in majority vote territory. How about if we do this? If we narrow it to Mr. Grant and Mr. Mitchell, go member by member and just poll people, and without taking that kind of yay, nay vote, but ask each individual to pick one name, go down the list, and whoever gets the most votes gets the most votes, without motions and seconds and such. Would that meet with everyone's approval?
Sure.
Okay. Let me start on this end, and we'll just go down the row. Mr. Freeman.
Mr. Grant.
Ms. Phillips.
Mr. Grant.
I'm going to go with Mr. Grant. Mr. Davis.
Mr. Grant.
Ms. McNeil.
Mr. Grant.
And Mr. Smith.
Mr. Mitchell.
Okay, I think we are in Mr. Grant territory. Certainly, with no offense to anyone else on this list, and I hope that we would see many of these same names appear the next time we have a vacancy, because this is a great list. I think we would be notifying, Meadows Keefe, I think, is walking back in, Mr. Grant, that he would be replacing Mr. Friedman.
They just voted Mr. Grant 6-1, 5-1.
Mr. Currington, you had a look on your face just now. Did you have?
No, I would just add, I also went and reviewed the ethics code. It is also silent. It just simply says, 2 board members shall be appointed by the ethics board, period. So again, it's silent as to whether it's a majority vote or not.
Okay. That would move us down to the Committee of One reports. Ms. Meadows Keefe, you want to walk us through this item on the agenda?
I will, and Mr. Friedman did very admirable service on that Committee of One for investigators. We had put an RFP out to hopefully get some people interested in doing that sporadic job. Although several firms downloaded the application materials, none of them went ahead and filed them. So I did talk to our procurement officer, Mr. Threewitz. So he's going back to those applicants that downloaded the application and didn't respond to find out why. And so he's gotten some responses. One organization was headquartered in Texas, so I'm not sure they would have been the best choice anyway. So we will probably retool the RFP to make it maybe clearer, more succinct, and reissue that to see. And then the other option is that we can employ other methods of looking, which was kind of old school, going through and seeing who lives here in Tallahassee and compiling them that way, because we do have that freedom to contract as needed with somebody. The preference was, of course, to try to use a clear and public process that's uniform and recognizable. But I think the main thing that was disturbing to the applicants was they weren't sure when the work was coming, how much work was coming, and when. So if they're in a busy season, it wasn't appropriate. And of course, if they're trying to keep their door open, they want to know that there's a flow of business. So I think those were some issues with it.
Okay, Mr. Friedman.
Yeah, I talked to Matt Pellegrino, who I had encouraged to apply. He's a retired FBI agent, retired supervisor here in Tallahassee. And he and Al Biner, I sat with him yesterday at lunch, both indicated that they really didn't want to get attached to something that is sporadic. They'd be both perfectly happy if we had a job, call them up and said, "Are you free now?" And if they were, they would be happy to do it. But they really didn't want to get latched onto something if it wasn't steady work. Al does steady work for the Bar Association in the courts. And I mean, most of the judge removals in the state that you've seen lately that have occurred have been his investigations. I mean, we can get good people. And I would say, even though I'm not going to be on the board, if it comes to the point where you need to find some really good investigators who are unbiased, I'll be glad, give me a ring. I'll be glad to put you in contact with one or two of these guys who, both of which have very high ability and also ethics.
Personally, I might just stop at giving you a ring, but,
If his wife
well,
is
actually,
okay with it.
call your wife
Right.
first, of course,
Yeah.
for permission to call you.
To be honest with you, I was a little higher in management than they are. They're probably a little bit, their skills are a little less rusty than mine. Thank you.
Okay. We've already done the scheduling of the September. Did everyone give Ms. Meadows-Keefe your availability for the September meeting? And have you had a chance to look at those?
No.
Okay. We will come back to that. Well, if you'll look at it, you can tell us what we told you. The next item on the agenda is Article 4D in the bylaws. This is changing the meeting at which we select the next chair, so that we would select that person in December, with them then being prepared to chair the January meeting, so we don't have a weird situation where somebody steps into the chair in a meeting for which they did not set the agenda. This is our first look at this, so if it'll be up at our next meeting for approval. If anybody has any comments, concerns, edits to the one-word change. Seeing none. The item after that is a change in Article 3CD. If a member resigns in writing to the chair with a copy to the ethics officer, we'd be adding, and the board votes to accept the resignation. Told that this better aligns with the amendment to the city charter. That again is our first look at actual language and would be up next month for approval. If anybody has any comments, questions, or edits to that language, now would be the time. Seeing none, we are scheduled for about a 10-minute break. And we will be back, can't see the clock from here.
And if you have not provided me with your circled dates, please do so at the break, because I only have 3 forms.
Okay, and Ms. Meadows-Keefe then will tell us when our September meeting will be, of course, subject to change in the future. We'll be back at 12:30.
All right.
Based on our notes to Ms. Meadows-Keefe about our September meeting, I think she has compiled the available dates and is going to report to us.
It looks like the best date for everyone is Thursday, September 14th, from 5 to 8 o'clock p.m. Please indicate now if you cannot attend said meeting, but from my informal tabulations of these documents, that is when we will meet in September with the chair's assent to that.
Okay. And I would ask the flexibility from the members of the board that based on our agenda, if it looks like we can push any of our meetings start time back to 5:30 for everyone's convenience, particularly anyone who might want to attend that gets a little farther from working hours. I will exercise some discretion in terms of if it looks like a meeting is a 2.5-hour meeting slot would work. So we may see some of them pushed back a bit. I would also direct Ms. Meadows-Keefe to notify the person we selected to fill Mr. Friedman's slot that he can start attending next month. You can provide him with the various materials, particularly the charter amendment and our bylaws, and our meeting schedule so that he can plug us in for all the appropriate times.
Okay, I will notify him when this meeting's over.
Okay. Where are we? We are back finishing up, I hope, our self-evaluation that we started back in November. So the next item on our agenda, in this piles of paper, is our recommendations to ourselves. And we have a list of 9 items that I think we've talked about in the past. Everybody's had a chance to review. We can go over them if you like, or I can just take comments, questions, concerns, edits on the 2-page list numbered 1 through 9. Ms. McNeil.
Where are we with the website? I'm just curious.
Ms. Meadowski.
Okay, first of all, the city is redesigning / updating its overall website to give it a more user-friendly look and feel. So I met with the Director of Communication, and so we're going to roll along with that city redevelopment and redesign. I'm going to be going through our existing web pages, editing those, perhaps with assistance from another board member, to make them more user-friendly. And I've talked to the city staff about design concept for our page, where we have a separate YouTube channel if people want to watch our meeting calendar, agendas, kind of a more condensed version of our current web presence, which is kind of scattered.
Yeah, it is.
Yep.
Okay. So that'll be ongoing for, if I know the IT world at all, for a while.
We're on it.
Okay, and can I get you just to add that to your report, your monthly report, just to make sure there's a statement about status on that, so every month we have a chance to opine or to make any decisions if there are design decisions that the board members might want to weigh in on, pink background versus a blue background or whatever. The kinds of things we're
I think it's neither, but.
Okay, well, I was trying to think of IT decisions that we're competent to make. Okay. So on our self-evaluation results, our recommendations for future actions of the board. I think this is our final set of recommendations to ourselves. So what I would hope for is a recommendation that we publish this as the result of our self-evaluation and our recs to ourselves. I see Ms. Phillips nodding, so I'm going to take that as a motion.
Yes.
And I see Mr. Davis smiling. I'm going to take that as a second. Using a little discretion here. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, like sign. So we have adopted those, and we've got recommendations to ourselves, which we will be following up on over the next several meetings, because some of them are things we can do pretty quickly. For instance, concerning the closing of complaints, others are things that are going to, like the website, that may actually be ongoing for the existence of the board, I would hope, that we can continue to make it better and better. The next item is the draft, coming again from our self-evaluation, a draft letter to the City Commission that serves 2 purposes. One is it would be our kind of annual report to the City Commission about what we have done since we are spending the city's money just by existing. And 2 is a series of recommendations, and again, these came from our meetings, November, December, January meetings, beginning on page, I guess these aren't numbered, on about the 5th page. halfway down the page, it says, based on these tasks, our recommendations to the city follow and are divided into 3 categories. And again, these are all things we've talked about in the past concerning changes that we would recommend in city policies and procedures, changes that we would recommend in city ordinances, and a change to the city charter dealing solely with our 7th member if the city ever puts a charter amendment, if and when the city puts a charter amendment in front of the voters, because that would require an amendment to the charter and voter approval. So in those 3 broad categories, this would be the results of our discussion concerning things that we have talked about, really a culmination of what we've looked at over the last 2 years, into these 3 categories of things where we think the city could tighten up on things that are ethics or ethics appearance, and things that would specifically affect our jurisdiction and our ability to opine or to evaluate complaints on ethical behavior. And I would give everyone a few minutes to review and digest.
Oh, we have a change in font. Under education.
Oh, I think that was something that got added. That actually is, yeah. There was something in there, and if you saw it on screen, I think it's in red.
Yeah, but it's,
Yeah, and then the word educated is, yes.
We'll fix that.
but the whole font, yeah, just
Right.
kind of got, yeah.
Well, we'll go through the whole document
Okay.
and clean up, but this is really for content.
Sorry.
No, that's fine. And tying back into the ethics moment, I think it's on page 6, but it may be page 7. The second point to the city on city ordinances, consistent with the number of complaints and number of opinions that the state commission has dealt with, we've focused on misuse of position, conflicting employment, lobbyist registration, and gifts, which are 4 of their top categories. So it seems like those would be the most likely issues to arise. And again, 2 on city ordinances is largely things where we're recommending expanding our jurisdiction to clearly include these things. Some of the language in the charter amendment, you could argue one way or the other, but we're not certain that we have current authority to address these issues.
City attorney may have a comment. That's
Mr. Currington, you have a,
city attorney.
Mr. Currington, nothing?
I'm not sure the question.
Oh, just if you had any comments on this document generally.
Oh, I reviewed it, and I think it's good.
I note the city attorney is in the back of the room, as he often is, monitoring our progress. If you have any comments, sir? Not to put you on the spot, you're certainly always welcome to talk or not talk, as you choose.
I'm happy to be put on the spot because I don't want to subsequently, when I oppose all the suggestion of ordinances, to anybody be caught off guard. I think my previous comments have indicated that I am not in favor of and would not support expanding jurisdiction at this point in time, maybe down the road, maybe particularly after the session of the legislature, maybe particularly after you've had any cases arise in the city of Tallahassee that you can point to and say, hey, we need to have additional jurisdiction. From my perspective, the additional jurisdiction is duplicative of what the State Ethics Commission is doing, which means it is duplicative in terms of function and also of cost. That obviously should be a consideration. And secondly, I think it detracts from what my commission has routinely expressed to me, is that the central focus should be education as opposed to investigation. And I think this sends the wrong message. So I think it's, particularly after only 2 years of operation, and the first year, in all fairness, was major part of it was spent organizational activities, that there's really nothing you can point to say, we need this because. That would be my comments on it.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate that.
Which brings me to another question. I was going to bring this up later, but I agree that our responsibility is to prevent, to me, to prevent any misuse or any ethical violations. So I kind of wonder where we are on our handbook, because I think that that's one of our avenues. I mean, that's one of the requirements for us to complete, and that is definitely a tool for, I know it doesn't have to do with this particular document, but I will continue pushing that because I think the education component is very important.
Yes, Ms. Meadows-Keith.
Okay, I actually have one in draft form. There's text in it. It's outlined. As I am educating employees and hearing from citizens, I am learning things that perhaps need to be included. So I'm adding to that at all kind of junctures as I think of things. So I have not yet wanted to share the document for editing because I don't think it's at that stage. It is outlined, it's got text in it. What I plan to do at the perhaps next meeting, if there's time, is show the different formats in which the information could be presented. Different jurisdictions have done it in different ways. So it's to be utilized by citizens and employees, so it's meant to do that kind of dual purpose, and then wanting to write it in appropriate, understandable, plain English. So there's ongoing work on that. If a board member wants to review that, at this point, I'd be happy to share the document. I don't think it's ready for that at this point, but.
Okay, I have two comments. One, I'm wondering if this isn't something that maybe gets published electronically and is kind of a living document, so that month to month, literally things could be added or clarified. No, hopefully not deleted, but there would be kind of like an ethics. The ethics moment kind of keeps us up to speed on new things that are happening. So there might be opportunities to have some of those kinds of things that are just reported in there. So it would be not like a book that you see on a rack and you take a copy and it's first edition, but something that is subject to pretty continuous updating and change. And the second is let's plan to either at the March meeting or the April meeting.
April will be good.
Because we've got about a good hour of ethics training for us in the next meeting, so we're going to be ethics education. So we may be a little tight. We'll put that on one of the next agendas to review kind of where we are at the moment, and get an idea for a format, whether we want it to be in a question and answer or a short paragraph or issue-by-issue sort of format.
Mr. Chair, yeah, and I'll just point out that where I'm leaning is that the Palm Beach County has a very good document, and it's got, you know, an introduction, and I think what the charter amendment has in mind is something that's accessible electronically, because people like that. I also do think that a printed document that can be distributed and maybe be in the back of the room at a commission meeting, or if I travel to a civic organization to talk, can be left. I think by the term handbook, it actually means a document that can be touched and distributed,
Sure,
as well as electronically transmitted. So the way I'm working it is anticipating both. And what I'll plan to do in April, as I have a more complete text and outline, I'll show you several examples of what I'm thinking, and then I can get some feedback from the board about how they want it to be finalized. And I anticipate working with Ms. Phillips on editing.
Okay, back on this letter to the city. Oh, sorry,
Oh, I thought you were getting ready to talk.
Ms. Davis?
You go ahead. You were going
No,
to-
please.
Are you asking for comments on this?
Yes,
right
sir.
now? I had a thought, and I asked this question maybe to be educated better, but that section where it says, the independent ethics officer completed the following activities in addition to regular monthly board preparation, attendance at city commission meetings and workshops. Would that include all that you've done through the year of 2016 in educating city employees on ethics requirements?
It would. I did not enumerate the number of times they did it. But yes,
That's on about page 3, isn't it?
And what I'm thinking of is how the referendum that was passed that started this board. Obviously, education was such a major part of that focus of what our duties were to be, that I thought that if there was any more that could be fleshed out there to show how often Julie's meeting with city employees, I'm sorry, Ms. Meadows O'Keefe, I
that's fine.
don't mean to call you by your first name, but how often she's performing the education process. Perhaps the city commission already knows that fully and they don't need to be told that in a letter, but to me, it's encouraging when you can hear how often the educational process is going on. It's just a reminder to everybody, look, this is an important component that's taking place.
Okay, so we will add, I think probably add a bullet that will talk about the frequency or of meeting, of education sessions, or the number of employees, or have some data point in it that will stress that.
Sounds good.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
if I might add on that point, I think it would be also hugely important to indicate the number of times that the ethics officer has met with a variety of city advisory committees. Those are citizens that typically know nothing about the state ethics and the city ethics laws, and that has taken up an education gap that the city attorney's office over the years has tried to fill that gap, but Ms. Meadows Keith has done a tremendous job. We have almost 100 advisory committees, and we have citizens from all walks of life on that. And I think that is typically an area where folks can get themselves in trouble when they're trying to be active citizens and participate. And so I think that would be another area, along with employees, that you'd want to emphasize.
Okay, so with the board's concurrence, we will make sure that bullet is also in here and is covered with some data. More comment? Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm just curious if Mr. Shelley has put in an appearance card before the board today.
No, sir, but we'll get one
Because
from.
he does come to you as just another citizen I know he's representing his client.
Yeah, well, in this case, though, I invited him up since I saw him in the audience, but we will make sure that we have a card. So let me go quickly one time through this, and then we'll see if we can wrap this up. We're recommending changes in city policies and procedures relating to outside employment, so there's some way to track city employees who have outside employment, particularly as it might relate to both their supervisors and us, if there's ever a complaint, understanding where there's possibility for conflict. Recommendation on lobbyist registration concerning clarifying the exclusions and exemptions of people who do not have to register as lobbyists, so that individual citizens who are not being paid to represent anyone, that it is crystal clear to them that they're not violating any rules. The tightening up a little bit on the city policies related to gifts. We know that individual units within the city have specific gift policies, but we're not sure. I think based on all that we've heard, we're not sure that there is a broad policy within which all of that fits, or with which all of that is consistent. Changing ethics training to ethics education, and we will continue to work with the city on all of the educational opportunities. On the city ordinances, obviously we're pointing to those ordinances in Jacksonville and Miami-Dade and Palm Beach related to misuse of position, conflicting employment, lobbyist registration, and gifts. And on the city charter, our one recommendation, if there is ever something put, or when there's something put before the voters, to add some language that would allow us, if we have a vacancy that is unfilled by the appointing authority, whoever that might be, that we could, until that appointing authority acts, that we could fill that vacancy. So if you have an appointing authority that never acts, we would fill it and we would just fill the position. If you have an appointing authority for whatever reason didn't appoint for 3 months, 6 months, 7 months for some reason, that we would be able to temporarily fill that position, so that we can make sure that we always have a quorum of, or a group that is representative and hopefully composed of 7 people. That was, to the best of Julie and my ability, the summary of what we had discussed in the prior months. So if there are not, other than the couple of bullets that we're going to do, and then the, one final proof on fonts and such, would be my intention to sign this and send it on to the city. Any comments, questions, concerns? Okay, I'm going to say Ms. Phillips is going to move that the chair, after making those minor revisions,
Go ahead and proceed with sending the letter to the city.
Okay, and Ms. McNeil seconds. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, like sign. And our self-evaluation recommendations are concluded. The self-evaluation actions, of course, we have those 2 pages of things that we will follow up on. As I do each month, I would ask if any member of the board or staff have anything that we need to put on, and I would also gladly take public comment, anything that we need to put on our next agenda that we haven't talked about. Ms. Phillips.
Just as a follow-up on the fraternization update for that, I just don't know where it is in the process.
Ms. Meadows-Keefe.
I will indicate that the HR director had to go on some leave for some medical reason, and we'll be back, and so I will report on that when I'm able to determine that.
Okay, outstanding. Any other comments? And that'll be ongoing until we see the final policy. Once the city issues its policy, we'll
Right.
put it on the agenda, but we'll certainly try to track the progress.
Yeah, I just didn't want it to drop.
Absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely.
And just one more comment, I will not be here at the March meeting.
Okay.
I will be in Norway.
Did the board approve that travel?
Yes.
And Mr. Currington will be missing which meeting? May, for Mr. Currington, who's not going quite so far, but again to exotic, non-Tallahassee places. Mr. Putzine, did you have a comment on non-agenda items?
I have several.
You're recognized for several comments, sir.
I was just going to talk about a couple things, but several things have come up, so my list is somewhat longer, but I will try to be brief. The first point I'd make is that I agree with Ben Wilcox that disposition of complaints, even those that appear to be legally insufficient, should require a vote of the board. It's the board that is the independent body. The ethics officer works on behalf of the board, and consideration of complaints is probably the board's most important charge. Therefore, it's a task that deserves the consideration by the full board. I also think that the board should receive details of all complaints prior to voting on the ethics officer's recommendations. As for your concern, Chairperson Herring, I believe that usually Ms. Meadows-Keefe can introduce the information about a complaint without disclosing confidential information. However, if the discussion does require the identity of either the complainant or the potential respondent, then the discussion indeed must occur in executive session. We all agree on that. But this could, I think, easily be accomplished with a minimum disruption by occurring either before the meeting or before the public session of the meeting or after. Another little point that I would add is that several months ago our coalition met over lunch to consider recommendations for how the ethics board could better publicize its activities, its mission, and its availability to the public and to serve the people of Tallahassee. One modest suggestion that we made at the time was that the city should, this board should consider including information about the board, its mission, its purpose, in utility flyer that goes out to all the citizens of Tallahassee who use City of Tallahassee utility services. At the time I was told, however, that the city policy prevents using the inserts for any activity or announcements not related to city utility services. Well, for the first time in my 43 years of living in Tallahassee, I actually started reading those inserts, and only to find that oftentimes the topics that discuss services, events, or announcements have nothing to do with city utilities. So I would still say that that would be an appropriate vehicle for this committee to publicize to the citizens of Tallahassee the important work that you do. The third point I would ask is, has the ethics board initiated any complaints or investigations? Members only have to avail themselves of print and broadcasting media in our city to be vigilant for potential ethics violations. And certainly during the last 2 years, the media has provided reports regarding questionable public ethical behavior, yet I'm not aware of any self-initiated actions from this board. From my perspective, the Ethics Board is not taking advantage of one of its most important powers. It's a power that the Florida Commission on Ethics has sought from the legislature almost since it was created by the Sunshine Amendment in 1976. It's a significant power, and I encourage the board to use it. Also, when a citizen comes before this board with a potential ethics issue, which I recall has happened 3, maybe even 4 times, it would appear to only be common courtesy for the board to address the issue and for the ethics officer to report back to the board and to this committee regarding any actions that has been taken with regard to the issue. And then last, I strongly disagree with Mr. Shelley's point that the primary role of the board is education rather than investigation. All you need to do is read the charter. Prevention of ethical violations is certainly important, but ensuring that public policy is made for true public purpose rather than inuring to the benefit of policymakers and administrators certainly requires the stick of effective investigation and enforcement. And I think that is the most important charge to the committee. I also want to say I apologize for my informal dress today. My City of Tallahassee electrical service to my Benton Hills home was interrupted when I was in the shower this morning. It threw off my entire morning. Thank you.
Thank you for those comments, and casual dress, as you may have noticed based on my model, is just fine. Any other comments? I've made notes on all of the comments that we've gotten today, and a number of them will kind of roll into our implementation of our recommendations to ourselves from our self-evaluation, and we'll see what we can do to follow up on all that stuff. I would, if there are comments, questions, concerns, Mr. Smith?
No, I'm fine.
Ms. McNeil?
I'm good.
Mr. Davis? Ms. Phillips?
No.
And good night, Gracie, to Mr. Friedman's chair. With that, I would announce that our next meeting is Tuesday, March 21st, 2017, from 4 to 7 here in the City Commission chamber, minus Ms. Phillips. And we are adjourned.
Should leave it here. Should leave this here.
How much paper?